How can we quickly get this information out? What are the creative ways that we can make a difference and expand what accessible lodging equals? One way that we've done it is work with state parks and looking at cabins, yurts, and lodging units, and really expanding traditional short-term rentals into outdoor hospitality. So in our industry, what we've historically looked at are private homes, rooms like Airbnb does, condos, apartments. But what about the outdoor hospitality? We're seeing, with the economic times that we're in right now, that people are looking for what are affordable ways to travel for work, for vacations, for family events.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Reframe First, the podcast where we have honest conversations with business leaders about market trends, about challenges they're working through, about the bets they're making. I'm Alexei, I'm the host here, and let me welcome our today's guest, Lorraine Woodward. And Lorraine is CEO and founder at Becoming RentAble. And hi Lorraine, it's really great to have you here.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Becoming RentAble is a platform dedicated to creating social change in how short-term rental industry looks by advocating for and educating about accessible short-term rentals in the areas of like mobility, cognition, hearing, aging, sight, and so on. They have quite a lot of accessible properties already on their platform. From what I learned, you are 2024 Skift winner, and you were nominated as Focus Wires for 25 travel startups for year 26. So, Lorraine, what are you building at Becoming RentAble? What's your mission, and what is it all about? Could you tell us?
Sure. So Becoming RentAble is a listing platform of accessible short-term rentals, primarily in North America. We are expanding as every day we get emails from all over the world. Hey, can we have you evaluate our property? And the company got started because our family, I have muscular dystrophy, use an electric wheelchair, and our two boys have muscular dystrophy. So trying to find a place that we all could access that was big enough, that had the features that we need, was very difficult. And I mean, we even did the Disney trip in Florida, and it didn't meet our needs. Believe it or not, their buses had 2 tie downs. So at the time, my boys are now 28 and 30. And so it was a time before cell phones. And so I'm really dating myself. But my husband and I had to divide and conquer. He would take one child on one bus. I would take a child on another bus because we needed 3 tie downs. And the bathrooms weren't accessible. I'm going, this is ridiculous. Why is this so difficult? So my boys are graduating high school, and it's like, I want them to have a different adult experience than what they've had in their childhood, and be able to go and see and go look at colleges, do that as a family. And we couldn't. So I ended up building a accessible short-term rental for my family. First reaction was, Mom, why are you doing this? Because it's a beach property. And they're like, we can't get on the beach. We can't, it was all about, we couldn't do this. We couldn't do that. So now we have this accessible short-term rental. And the boys love it, and they see what they can do because the property does meet their needs, and how they can go eat sushi with their friends, and how they can go to the bar down the street, and how they can get on the boardwalk. And they love it because they are not excluded from living a life with their friends. And to my surprise, when we started renting it, we've already had over 500 families rent our short-term rental, is their stories were all the same. And their stories were, it's really hard to find a place like this that meets our family's needs. So I started looking into the industry and looking at how do they address accessibility. And what we found out in 2021 is that the industry paid minimal to hardly any attention to what accessible travel look like in the lodging industry. It was all about wheelchair access, ADA, but no details. And I'm all about wheelchair access. Don't get me wrong, I use a wheelchair. But our friends, my mother in law, who's don't use a walker, had different needs. My boys and I have different needs.
Okay.
And so that's when Becoming Rentable got started, of really looking into what the problem is and what the solution is.
Okay. And when did you start it? Is it really like 2 years
We're
ago?
we're young. We're 5 years old this year, and our platform is the only platform that addresses specifically and exclusively accessibility. And so when we started the business, we really looked at what is accessibility, and we took it from the standpoint going beyond a wheelchair. So we grouped together mobility, which is people who need and use wheelchairs, walkers, crutches, and canes. And then we brought out our neurodivergent, our cognitive community, people who have needs in the area of autism, Alzheimer's, depression, mental illness. We're seeing a lot of that post COVID. And now we're going into creating our verifications for hearing and vision. So, really looking at a full scope of what accessibility needs are. So that's the first thing that we have dealt with. The second thing is, if you look at your three major platforms, your Booking.com, your Airbnb, your Verbo, you look at what your filter choices are, because that's what is going to allow what populates. And so what we found out is we had one platform with 8 filters, another platform with 10, and one with 16. And yet they were very broad in nature. They would say wheelchair accessible or ADA. But what does that mean?
Yeah, we have like 63 different filters on
We
Become.
do have 63. We're
It's
overachievers
good. Yeah.
because we believe that it's about your choices. What
Mhm.
do you need in a short-term rental? For me, I do need a zero threshold entry for my wheelchair. My boys can go into a property that has one step. My mother-in-law, who used walker, could go in one step. And so we looked at, do you need grab bars in the bathroom? Do you need a wheel under sink? Is your mirror at a certain height that you need? And so we built our verification and created 63 filters for mobility and cognitive, so that you're the one that can determine what your needs are. So by limiting your filters, really it limits how many people will rent those properties due to lack of information.
Awesome. And like from what we researched, like there is quite a big demand and not as like there's big mismatch between demand and supply.
The, you know, There is. There's a challenge to our business too. And so what we know is, if we look at just the United States and we look at people who have mobility, cognitive, full range of disabilities, it's over 100, and I believe 123 million people. The numbers that we see a lot of times is 1 in 4 people have a disability, or 72 million have a disability. What we don't look at, and that is based on the ages of 43 to, gosh, my numbers are wrong, so please excuse me. We'll say maybe it's 30 to 43. It's a very small age range, but we want to look from birth to 16. We want to look at 18 to 43, and we want to look at our seniors. So if you look at our population up into your senior years, that's over 120 million people that we're reaching. So we know that the interest and demand is there. The challenge that we have is the booking platforms still have limited information. People don't understand what equals an accessible short-term rental. What does that mean? What does that include? So there's a lot of education that needs to take place, so that the property side of it, they can identify what they have in their property. For example, an important feature is a hard surface driveway. I need to be able to get my vehicle to the property. I then need to be able to get out of my vehicle and
Uh-huh.
then go to an accessible entrance. It may be the front door, it may be a garage door, it may be the back door. But what is that entrance that I can get into? And so we'll stop there to look at, okay, why, so when people think of it, an accessible short term rental, they may go, oh my gosh, I've got to tear down walls. I need to redo my bathroom. It's going to cost a lot of money. But if we just look at that element of access, you may already have it in place and it will cost no money. But again, you may not think of that. So then we look at the door. How wide is your door? It's the information that allows somebody to be able to know if your property is accessible or not. For me, I'm a wide load. So can I get through a 32-inch door, which is the common size of a front door, a side door, or a back door? Yes, I can. And sometimes you may know that I'm there because I'll leave little tread marks of me going through the door.
Yeah.
So I like a 36-inch door, which is a little over $1 more than a 32-inch door. So if you're looking at an investment, you're building or renovating a property, if you have a 36-inch door, you're broadening who can reach and enter and book that property by the simpleness of saying, my doors are 36 inches. So I'm going, yay, this is an option. Now you have the driveway. I can now wheel my wheelchair through the hard surface, and a hard surface can be pavers. It can be the concrete, the asphalt. I don't access sand, dirt, grass, but I know what you have. Now I can get through your 32 or 36-inch door. So we look at that. We look at, I call it a bumpity bump. What's the threshold like? If it is 0 and I can slide in, great. But sometimes with that 2-inch threshold, I have to kind of go back and give me a running start and then, go bum and I can go through. But if your platform at the front door is limited, then that may be a challenge for me. But it's all about that information do you have? So when we're going in and looking at choices, it's very simple. Can I pull my van in to your property? Can I get to an accessible door? Can I go through that accessible door? Can I go to the bathroom? Can I sleep? And can I participate in a family activity? So that's what we look at. And we look at that in a very descriptive way, but it's getting this information to our properties.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
also
our next audience, yeah.
that's also about kitchen appliances. Can you access them? Like yeah, I see the
I
room
mean,
you and
it's
these are
interesting.
designed like for accessibility.
The kitchen's a tricky one. So now we're looking at the people who can benefit and use this accessible short-term rental, which we know the numbers are great. We're looking at over 1 billion people worldwide. So it's like, all right, we got the people. We've got to get the message to the people that these properties exist, which is a challenge because historically, people with different types of disabilities, they don't even put it in their radar and think about that they can do this because historically they haven't been able to. And so we've got to look at and share this information. When it comes to the kitchen, we hear, different schools of thought. One school of thought is it's a vacation. I'm not cooking. We're going out, we're ordering out, and we want to be able to, if we order out, do we have a place that we can eat? I.e., a countertop that I can roll under, a kitchen table. What are the ways and areas that I can eat? Secondly, do you have a place that maybe I can reheat my food? A microwave. We see a lot of microwaves that are over the stove and not accessible for somebody who's short or somebody that's in a wheelchair. It's an easy fix. You can go down to your local Walmart, Costco, any big box store, and $69, get a microwave, put it on a counter, and you're good. And so as far as the wheel under sinks, the elevated dishwashers, different appliances, there is a group that say, you know what, we can't afford to eat out and we need this. And that's the beauty of our filtering is that, again, if you need that, we have those filters that you can choose. So those properties will populate to the top and look for that. And so we do address that. But again, as we're looking at the host, the short-term rental property, if you have it say it, show it. If you don't have it, it's not included. And so we try to look at both scenarios. And if you need appliances, we identify elements of what is accessible. And I can just go on probably in talking without you asking me a question. So I'll take a breath, drink some water, and let you ask me a
Sure.
question and make sure I'm on track and where you want
Sure,
to
sure.
go.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome because like it's really interesting. Like one of my question was like first you're certifying these properties to be like to be accessible for different groups of people. This is part of like your business that you do. And one of my question was uh, like what does certification mean operationally for you? Like how hard is it to certify? Like how do you do it?
So it's interesting that you use the word certified. And when we started becoming rentable, now this is timely, this is good, that we certified properties. One of the challenges in our business is that we use the word certification.
Okay.
And has become a fear factor in our industry. And the fear is we are not compliant. In the United States, it's to the ADA, and that we're afraid that we're going to get sued. So we're not going to get our property certified. And
Okay.
so as of tomorrow, we are changing the certification to be verification. And because what we do is we go in and we verify, you tell me that these are the features you have. Now we need a third party to go in and verify that this information indeed is what you have. Because one large platform, Airbnb, does identify that they have a team that evaluate if you have it or not.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that isn't always the case, and it's a very lengthy process. So for becoming rentable, we want to make sure, and that is our business with third party. We go in, we verify. We can get this done in a 48-hour period. It is a virtual process. And the reason we went virtual versus going into a property is we want those that are visiting online, because that's how you find a rental. We want to be able to determine, what do they see? What does your guest look at? And that we can say that, yes, the door, here is how wide the door is. Here is the driveway. A lot of times when we're verifying information, we actually find more features than the host goes, oh, I didn't know that was accessible. And we put in there. So we go in and we verify the information. It's a free, you can go online and do a free assessment where we'll go in and say, yes, you have these 8 things that we're looking for, that we could verify and give you that badge. Everybody wants a badge. So
Okay,
you
sure.
can put it on your listing to say, we are becoming rentable verified property. So there's no guesses. Because for me, I go to a property and dadgummit, they identified all of this. They didn't say there's 5 steps to the entrance. And I just took for granted they said they were accessible. And now we're on vacation for a week and I can't get in the property. And there's no other property and there's no hotel rooms that I can access. And so it's not like you can just go down the street and find another rental. So that verification is critical and key to continue to book your travel and expand this industry to a broader audience that hasn't been done before.
So you're sending some third party to do the check for you.
That's
And
who we are. Yes.
how do you rely on like on the check itself? Because you should understand the actual need. Or do you send like a long checklist of like items that need to be checked there? Like
Right. So
it's
when
of
you go,
5 steps, if you do not have the problem of 5 steps, you may not even understand that problem.
exactly. And that's what we look
Steps,
at.
you're looking for microwave, how high it is, and not for the step.
And that's where we come in, is we go in and we look for those things. You are not a verified property if we cannot see them. If we cannot see that there's an entrance to your home. If we can't get our car in your parking, if we can't get that access, then you may not qualify. But you may qualify for a cognitive verification. Are you a property that is fragrance free? Do you have blackout curtains? Do you have dimmer switches? And people may go, wow, wait a minute. I have dimmer switches. We use fragrant free. We have blackout curtains. Those are accessible. The number one area of concern for people with cognitive disabilities, particularly Alzheimer's, autism, is we have wanderers. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a bunny outside. No, Lorraine, you can't go see the bunny right now. You need to stay in here and then we're going to go out together. And that is by having a secondary lock that I can't reach in my wheelchair will allow me to be safe in that short term rental. So I don't go look for the bunny, follow the bunny, and now the bunny's down by the lake and I fall in the lake and I drowned. That is a huge fear factor. And so by having that secondary lock that costs less than $10, you are going to broaden your exposure to an incredibly great audience.
And like like from your data, in your experience, like which accessibility needs like show the biggest gap between like supply and demand? Like which needs are like covered the least?
Is supply and demand? No, it's the supply side
Yeah.
that we're struggling with. So in the United States, there are gosh, how many now? I really should have checked my numbers a lot, but I think there's 2.1 million um, rentals, short-term rentals in the US, but yet there are less than 1,200 accessible
Oof.
short-term rentals. So that's 0.01% of our inventory that's devoted to accessibility. But yet we have over 50% of our population that need these features. So, it is a missed opportunity. Basically, you are leaving money on the table right now if you're not addressing what features that you have are that are accessible. So our challenge is looking at how do we get this information to the host, to builders, to property managers. It's like, oh, I don't have time to deal with that. We're busy enough. Well, are you busy enough not to get more bookings, not to, expand your reach? And our certifications or our verifications, I'm already saying certifications. It's like, it's $200. It is a subscription based program. And, yet one verification label is less than one night stay in a property. And so your return on investment is substantial. But again, we do have this challenge of how do we get to even 1%? We're proud that we have, one of the largest listing of accessible short-term rentals in the US and Canada, but yet that's 1,200. I mean, we need 10,000, we need 100,000. I
Yeah.
mean, that's not even, one per metropolitan city in the US. And they're great. I mean, one of the examples I used, I'm from Arkansas, and at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, they have a huge sports population, and 75,000 people come and watch the Razorbacks play football or basketball. Yet that community only has 5 accessible short-term rentals. So what about your alumni who are of our aging community? What about students with disabilities who want to come and look at their institution to go to college? But yet they only have 5 rentals. Again, but you have 75,000 people coming into your community, 20, 30 times a year to go to those sporting events. Again, I could use that in North Carolina where we are with Duke University, NC State basketball, UNC. Think about those events that you have. What are the for the DMOs? What events, entertainment, or conferences do you have where groups of people are coming, but there's not a space for them to stay?
You mentioned DMOs. Do you try to partner with DMOs because that's kind of their interest to like grow this kind of niche?
Right. Again, our challenge is so, yes, we have that. What we're seeing is DMOs get traffic from hotels, but yet hotels are limited on how many accessible properties or rooms that they have.
Yeah.
And so again, DMOs, just like the short term rentals, don't understand what that equals. And so it's been a slow process in getting that buy in. I know that later on we're going to be talking about things like CAC. We're going to look at our CEO post brand awareness and how do we do those customer acquisitions and get that information out. And that's what we're building. Unfortunately, for the industry of short-term rental, very limited research has been done. The stats have not been there to address this need. And we're a small young company. There's only a few employees and we're had 4 years of experience behind us. And I've made the decision, and I don't know if it's a good decision or not, is not to invest in paid marketing. It's like you're building the website, you are doing all of these things. I really have struggled with looking at debt and how do we address growing.
You're a young company that's not investing in paid marketing, but somehow you partnered with Expedia Group.
I know we
Could
have
you tell
done
me? Tell us more
everything.
about it. Yeah,
Everything that we have done has been at zero cost to our business. We have
awesome.
not paid for any, and so consequently, we our return has been good because it's again positive and negative. Yes, we've worked with Expedia for a couple of years looking at addressing that one of the challenges that they have and booking platforms do have, and that's the education that there is lack of information for host and what accessibility means. And we were chosen to be part of an accelerator program that Expedia did 3 years ago. And there
Mhm.
were 12 companies that they chose to be a part of this accelerator program, 6 from the US, 6 from outside the US. And we were one of them. Again, looking at doing something that nobody else had done. And with Expedia owning Verbo, we were a natural fit. And I do credit our growth to the work that we have done and the support that we continue to receive from Verbo. But again, it's been a slow educational process and getting hosts to understand and then getting companies like Verbo and Booking and Airbnb to expand their filters. And when you are a large company, the process of expanding those filters is extremely time consuming
Yeah,
and expensive. And so the disadvantage for us is that time frame. I'm like, are you serious that it's taken us 2 years to get to this point? I'm like, even though I'm in a wheelchair, I am fast. I am quick. I see the need. I just turned 64 2 weeks ago. And so I'm like, the time is now. For me, I look at our 2 boys and I don't want to wait 2 years. How can we quickly get this information out? What are the creative ways that we can make a difference and expand what accessible lodging equals? One way that we've done it is work with state parks and looking at cabins, yurts, and lodging units
Mhm.
and really expanding traditional short term rentals into outdoor hospitality. So in our industry, we've historically looked at are private homes, rooms like Airbnb does, condos, apartments. But what about the outdoor hospitality? We're seeing, with the economic times that we're in right now, that people are looking for what are affordable ways to travel for work, for vacations, for family events. And we're going to outdoor hospitality. And so we have designed a unit called the Accessible Retreat. It's a 400 square foot mobile park unit that is $120,000
Oh,
that can be purchased. Turn on investments about 5 years, which is pretty great. And we've gone to the state park. So we're looking at, again, how do we expand this need that our world has to travel?
yeah. Yeah, with regards to like the needs that the world has, like for what trends are you seeing like recently on the markets, like this new generation of travelers with, post-COVID times when travel became necessity and like travel should be, as an industry, should be booming right now. And what do you see? What's changing in your
You know,
opinion?
we hope what is changing, our attitudes, are the seeing a growth in a market that they've never seen before, alleviating the fear factor that you're not going to get sued if you have a verified product or property. That in the United States has been our greatest challenge is that people are afraid of getting sued. We are a world that, hey, don't like it, I'm going to sue them. But, again, I find from our rentals that people who stay appreciate what we have because they don't see it. Whereas my neighbor next door has an accessible short term rental, but not marketed. That they have the elevator, they have the zero threshold entry, they have the wide doors, they have a lot of features. But they have spent more money in people vomiting down the steps from drinking too much, tearing down doors, but yet we don't look at that. We're not considering, how do you verify how much people drink when they would come to your property? And as I look at our between the two properties, we've made more money, we've had more rentals, and we've had no lawsuits. So, but yet when you hear the word accessible short-term rental, there is a fear that your property's going to get beat up because of the wear and tear, use of a wheelchair
Mhm.
or walker, that it's going to cost a lot and that you're going to get sued. So, how do we eliminate those fears so that we can have more properties that meet people's needs? It's broadening that exposure. And so that's one of the trends that I hope that we'll see. Like this interview, I am being asked to participate in more interviews, speaking at more conferences, because one trend that we're seeing is the trend of accessible travel.
Mhm.
The accessible travel happens to be in looking at air travel and hotels. We're seeing a lot of information to the various media markets addressing those two areas. So how do we bring into play the accessible short-term rental? Somebody from Global Business Travel Association reached out to me a couple of years ago, and this gentleman was on the board of GBTA and said, Lorraine, thank you for changing how we look at global business travel. And I'm like, okay, you're welcome. And I'm like, okay, why are you really calling me? Are you trying to sell me something? And he said, no. He said, historically, business travel is ground, air, and hotel. But
Mhm.
businesses are missing the opportunity of hiring people with disabilities. They are missing the opportunity of retention, of community activity, because the employees now can rent a short term rental. So, where they couldn't maybe stay in a hotel or there was no rooms for them, there's a new option that we've never had before, and that is an accessible short term rental. So, businesses now have broadened their employee scope. They've broadened retention, and their businesses can grow in a different way that they haven't grown before because of this new option. And I never would have thought about that.
Yeah, I mean access to like a different group of employees, basically. Yeah, that's really interesting. Like you were talking like you touched this point, like that market is not seeing some opportunities. Like what 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 is there on the market is not seeing yet? What do you see? Like,
I think it is, again, this idea that it's expensive, that they see, oh, I'm watching HGTV and they're making a house accessible. And it's like, oh, we need to tear down this wall. We need to, add these different features, and it's just going to be costly. Well, again, by having 63 filters, it's about choices. It's not, can it be expensive? Absolutely. If you are building from scratch, it's not even 10% more of costing materials. The example with the doors, again, it's a little over $1 per door
yeah,
if you look at 36-inch doors versus 32-inch doors. A lot of misconceptions.
if you're at the point when you're building the property, because when it's done, you know it's done.
Right, exactly. So those are our greatest challenges is the misconceptions, not understanding of what it is. and the magnitude of the reach and the need that we have. It's not a discussion point. When we talk about return on investment, we don't always, our disability community. It's been a community across many markets that just haven't been able to come to the table, be a part of that conversation. And now we are looking to be included in these conversations as a real player in building this industry.
Okay. My next one would be like regarding your website, basically, maybe your web platform. And with people with disabilities, besides having 63 filters, probably need to have some kind of specialized user experience, like user interfaces, and probably you see something that other like big players are not seeing yet. So like where do most platforms unintentionally fail people with disabilities during search, during booking phases?
What they fail in time and time again is looking at their content, looking at, I mean, even the larger plug-in platforms that provide different plugins are not including people with disabilities. There are a number of tools out there that help generate your traffic, but yet what they are including is information not related to disability. They are looking at your demographics, they're looking at houseboats, they're looking at information that that is not inclusive. Again, you look across the board at filters. Large to medium size booking platforms have no information about inclusion, or they have the acronym of ADA or barrier free. But what does that mean? And there's no additional information there. So as we look at our communication, a visual, photographs. Very few platforms include photographs of people with disabilities enjoying a vacation or working at home. Look at commercials. Where right now, Verbo has Ken and Barbie as their new, branding and ambassadors, and there's no accessibility component to that. Looking at booking.com and the celebrities that they have, even the background information that's a part of their commercial is not inclusive of people with a walker, a cane, a wheelchair, somebody with a temporary disability. So again, that inclusion really encompasses our full industry. So even the back end of what it takes to bring in the acquisition of a customer, those products are not inclusive. And why aren't they inclusive? If their customer is going to gain and leverage this information to bring in new revenue, why are they not including in having access to disability?
Yeah,
What is that push point for them to not be inclusive?
yeah, yeah, I agree.
Hey, people, that are listening, reach out to me at Lorraine at becomingrentable.com. I would love to hear from you. How can we be a part of that customer acquisition in the products that you are selling for these strategic marketing activities that we're not a part of? We want to be a part of, we need to be a part of
Yeah,
so that we can have this expansion. We all have the same goal, and we are a business. We do spend money. In the United States, almost $700 million is what somebody with a disability has in expendable cash. That's a lot of money, but it's being left on the table because we're not
yeah,
included.
and that's a great niche for you actually. From reading the numbers, reading the like demand numbers, and seeing like what 1,200 properties, it's a great niche.
So, in regard to a niche population, we don't look at ourselves as a niche population. And what we do look at is what are your needs today? And making sure that we meet your needs. And so today I have different needs at 64 than I did at 54. And so that's our goal is to be able to identify what your needs are and finding those accessible properties are those properties that will meet your needs with an emphasis of, disability, mobility, cognitive, vision, and hearing. And so it's really changed the way we present ourselves and getting away from just and I do think that, that is a challenge. Oh, you're a niche population. You're a niche business. You only target this small sector of the industry. No, actually we target a very large part of this industry. And we are about your needs today or the needs of a family member today.
By calling it niche, I didn't mean the population niche, but rather a business niche. So there is like
Mhm.
big gap between supply and demand.
Yes.
And this is a business opportunity to work on, and that's great that you're addressing it. With regards to like user acquisition, we touched this point like a few times, and you mentioned you are not doing like any like paid marketing. On the other hand, like there were like Google AI issues when Google started providing AI answers. It hit everyone because it just took away maybe 40 to 50% of overall traffic to the final websites. Like, and so what are your like acquisition channels? And did Google affect you or did you benefit from that? How does it work?
I'm going to address the AI in
Yeah.
that we are very fortunate. We're working with Duke University. This is our second year in working with students at the master level. And we are currently working them with creating an AI product for our company. And that AI, and it won't be live for a couple of years because it is, again, it's students. Each student in their master's program have to give 520 hours to an effort. And so a number of students picked us. And where that AI is coming in is through photo recognition so that we would be able to go in and work with the platform with this technology to look at a property and go, oh, you do have a 32-inch door, a 36-inch door. You do have a zero threshold entry. Oh, you have a ramp. And so I believe, will really help us expanding to these platforms that we can go in and first tier have AI identify the images as it relates to disability. And then it will take less human time. And we do believe that human element is critical in our verification efforts. That a machine just can't go in and look and say, check, yes, you have it. But it can help us in that first, look see of what a property might have. So, in regard to AI, we are hopeful. I am nervous about debt. I don't like debt. My husband and I have bootstrapped our business, and so we haven't paid for those AI services. We also believe in education in that I like the idea of educating these students of what accessibility means. Commonly, as we work with different colleges and universities, we are in that educational front. So when they go out to the workforce, then they understand and think about accessibility in the work that they do from an engineering perspective, from a medical, perspective. And that is also how we grow our knowledge in being inclusive and educating that next generation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Great attempt. Like that's a great idea to make ask students help you out, and AI can do a lot for you, like in terms of like seeing the property and in terms of like getting this not certificate verification help
yes.
you, helping you out to get this verification to check all you need, like if everything is in place based on like the photo.
So part of our brand awareness and our CO effort, we ended up building an accessible short term rental property. We bought a 19 bungalow, we gutted it. And then if you go to our website, you'll see the little yellow house.
Yeah.
And it is a model property of mobility, vision, hearing. Yeah, vision and hearing. An example of what accessibility means and equals being non institutional, being a lovely property that you would want to go and stay with. that happens to have these features because we knew that education is key as we build what we're doing to not only the short term rental industry, but thinking about that next generation. So, students from the occupational therapy community can look at this property and we can educate them in the benefits from a medical perspective, from short term rental programs in a college and university, and to host that they can then touch, feel, see what this equals. And so that will also affect our customer acquisition so that if they know and understand, then the acquisition um, is less expensive and broadens what this means.
And what does your customer acquisition looks like right now?
What right now we're at zero cost because we
Yeah,
have
but
not.
they are still coming from somewhere, be it
Right.
like
So it's
social
through that
media or
education.
Google or education.
Right. It is through, making sure that we have our labeling, in place of everything that is accessible in any property that is on our map. It is getting on podcasts. It is being featured in a newsletter, magazine. And so our reach is challenging because we're not spending money. At
Yeah,
what
but you're
point?
spreading the word basically. Yeah.
Right. So at what point do we make those financial investments? And as a small business owner, that's the challenge that I have. You have to make money to spend money.
Yeah.
And how do we do that? And we're doing that through of a number of different revenue streams. I mean that is what's helping build our business. Is it through consulting that, a company will hire us to come in and meet with their engineers and meet with their IT department and how to build, adding 3 new filters to their program? Is it, through our verifying state parks properties? Is it, doing, creating STR or Instagram messaging? So there's a lot of different ways that we are building that awareness and bringing in revenue so that we can be able to reach more people through looking at what it takes to get a customer.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, this is how organic traffic works, and
Mhm.
quite likely that like you build a brand and people come to you by knowing your brand, by searching for your brand. And second one is like somebody is googling, I don't know, show me where can I travel with my disabilities. Quite likely it will pop up in the top of the Google search result.
If you look at short-term rental and you Google it and accessibility, we're commonly number 1. And so we're usually at the top 3, if not always number 1. We are very specialized. We are currently the only company that we're aware of across the globe that is making this effort to expand accessibility into the short-term rental. In a way, don't want to be the only one, but we're delighted that we are and that we are capturing the attention of Expedia, of state government, of other businesses that are considering the importance of meeting the needs of their customers who have disabilities.
Yeah, you are doing a really big job of like re-educating the market or educating the market in this case. And it's always hard in the beginning. When it gets going, then there will be other players who, who want to also pick up.
We hope that there are some players that are listening that are interested in the work that we're doing and want to reach out to us so that we can continue.
Yeah.
I think we're at that, usually it's so many days to see if your business survives. Then it's your 3-year mark. Well, now we're approaching our 5-year mark. How sustainable are we and how can we grow? And so we're at a critical point of building our business now. And now is the time that we're evaluating what is that next step for us.
And that's exactly my question. Like, what is it for you? Like, what you're betting on and like what you're building right now? Like,
It is our reach.
what's in progress?
It is a lot in progress. And it's interesting because our progress is taking this work to new areas like global business travel, like working with hospitals and their foundations. One of the greatest needs that we see And my advice to investors, if you want to invest in an accessible short term rental, build it, include it near a rehab facility or a hospital. That is one of the greatest needs that we see in the need of accessible short term rentals because, medical facilities have their areas of expertise. We know Boston has a great program, Cleveland Children's Hospital. We know that Duke University, Chapel Hill. And so people come in from 7 hours away, 10 hours away, and they have to be there multiple days and they can't stay in a hotel. So we had, one person who reached out to me at 9 o'clock at night. This lady was crying hysterically that her husband had cancer and they could not find an accessible place to stay. And he couldn't stay in a hotel because of the germs. And she's like, my husband will die if we don't find a place for him to be. And so we frantically looked and looked and we found a place. It was an hour and a half away. There was not anything in the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill market that was closer to where they needed. They were from West Virginia. And we then immediately started doing research, looking at the top 20 medical facilities to find out where do people who are coming in for treatments, hospitalizations, and have to stay, overnight or for 2 days or be observed. And that was their greatest challenge is finding places outside of the hotels that met their needs. And it still continues to be one of the greatest needs. In fact, we have a property, the little yellow house. We received a phone call from family. Husband was diagnosed with a progressive form of cancer. The doctors gave him 40 days. Their private residence was not large enough to bring in a hospital bed. So they asked if they could rent this property. And we said, sure. They said, we need it today. I said, sure, but we don't know how long we'll stay. I said, no problem. It's there for as long as you need it. So they said, well, it may be 40, 60 days. I said, great. So they moved in. They had the hospital bed. They had all the features that they needed. On the 14th day, they called me and said, thank you for your rental. Our dad passed away at 14 days. And in those 14 days, we were able to play games, sing songs, just focus on our time with our dad and our husband, or the lady's husband. And if it weren't for your property, then we would still be looking at how we could get a hospital bed into our home. And so it's an incredible gift that you're also giving families in an already difficult time. And we don't think about that part of what an accessible short-term rental can bring to families. And we are seeing more and more diagnosis because our medical community is becoming more and more advanced, thus a greater need of the benefits of an accessible short-term rental.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing. I didn't know what to ask next after
It is. And
the kind of story. You know.
I have, I will tell you one more story and that hopefully will make a difference. I was at our Carolina Beach, North Carolina property, the one I built for our family, and we had to pay for it. So we had the second floor, a short term rental. And a 16-year-old boy comes out of a van and he says, excuse me, ma'am, is this your house? And I said, it is. And his name is Gideon. And Gideon said, I want to thank you for this property because it's the first time I will be able to take a shower while on vacation. And I said, well, you are more than welcome. So I'm on the third floor. It's our family private residence. And the next day I go and I knock on the door. And they say, come in. And I said, hey, Gideon, how was your shower? And he goes, fine. I'm like, dude, what do you mean fine? You were so excited, your first shower on vacation. And he said, guess what? And I said, what? He said, I was able to pop popcorn all by myself. I said, you were? Because, yeah, I didn't have to ask mom. And I said, that's your favorite part of this. And he said, no. And it's like, wait a minute. So not the shower, not popping popcorn. He said, no. He goes, guess what? I was able to reach the thermostat by myself and I didn't have to battle with mom and turning down the thermostat. She always likes it really cold and I don't. And I said, that's your favorite part. And he said, no. I said, you're killing me. He goes, guess what? I could reach the light switch. So when mom went to bed, I could go turn on the lights and play games without her knowing it. And I said, 16-year-old, get it. That's your favorite part. I said, no. He said, my favorite part was being independent. And that's what an accessible short term rental is all about.
That's awesome. That's really great what you're building there because you're like enabling other people to be independent.
And live life
Yeah.
as we all want to.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I had other questions, but I don't think I should continue. It's really,
Well, there's always can be a podcast number two.
yeah, yeah,
And I appreciate this opportunity to share our story, to share the need that we have, and encourage investors to look at not leaving money on the table and to make a difference in your community.
yeah. Thanks a lot for coming, and I really appreciate you coming and sharing all these stories. And you're building amazing products. So,
Thank you
but
very much.
best of luck for you
All right.
in this
Thank
chat.
you.
Yeah. Thanks,
All right.
Lorraine.
All right. Thank
Thanks.
you. Mhm.
Bye.
Bye bye.